محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Inshallah, first and foremost I'd like to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And I'd like to congratulate you all, brothers and sisters, on this auspicious occasion. This, to me, is a grand celebration in my heart, and I'm sure a grand celebration in the hearts of all the mu'mineen. The birth anniversary of a lady who is one of the greatest women that has ever walked this earth. The daughter of a woman who was also named the mother of her father, the daughter of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she herself is a granddaughter of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're talking about Lady Zainab alayhi salam. Lady Zainab alayhi salam is a role model not just to women, but to us men as well. She's someone that if we truly read about her life and truly open our minds in regards to the history of what she has gone through, we benefit a lot. We understand aspects that we go through in our lives, but we can see and mirror with the things that she went through in her life. What are those things? First and foremost, one of the things that we know about Lady Zainab was a strong character, a strong personality. And we see this time and time again across the history, across her life span, of course, and it echoes throughout history afterwards. For example, the strength in her character when she stands against the tyrant in front, in the courtyard, in the hub, in the center, that's of dhulm, that's of oppression. And we can understand why her character was so strong. Not just because of her lineage, who her father was, and who her mother was, and her grandfather, and her siblings. It was not just only that, but her upbringing. She was born on the 5th year of Hijrah. She was born at a time where warfare was rampant. The Muslimin in Yathrib and Medina al-Nabi, they were always combating against those of Quraysh, the Kuffar of Quraysh. So she was brought up in an environment where she had seen a lot of people dying already, soldiers coming back wounded. She has seen when her brothers would come back wounded or blood on their clothing. So you can understand that this builds a strong character. It builds this resilience, which then in turn helps her when she sees the things that she does in Karbala afterwards. When we say she's a role model to us, how do we say that? Why do we say that? Of course, she was brought up in the household that of Amir al-Mu'min Ali ibn Abi Talib and Lady Fatima al-Zahra. So in a household that was known for its simplicity and not this grandeur. Although he was the Khalifa for a certain amount of time, and before that, of course, they usurped that power from him. We know that the simplicity shaped the way that she sees life as well. Growing up in an environment where her father was known Abu Turab, as Abu Turab because he would sleep on the soil instead of having a grand, comfortable bed, like certain other leaders. But that simplicity in the household, that even when she gets married, and she does get married to Abdullah bin Ja'far, her cousin, he was a very well-known person who had a lot of, he had riches, and he was known to be very wealthy as well. And of course he was the son of Ja'far al-Tayyar, also from a great household. But that didn't faze her as well, that didn't change her viewpoint, that didn't change her worldview as well. That although she had access to funds straight away, because her husband was who he was, right? She would still go back to the person she was linked with the most. She would go to the house of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. She would leave her house and go to the house of Imam Hussein as well from every few days. She would go there. And you can see a pattern in her life. What type of pattern is it? It's a pattern that of activism. Being active, not just in regards to justice, as we see in Karbala afterwards and in Kufa and in Sham, but also before them. You can see a pattern that when she was within the community, she wouldn't neglect the community. She was the daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen. So she was already brought up in a household that of knowledge. And her mother was Fatima al-Zahra. The household that of knowledge. Her activism was giving back to the community. She was an example to us, an exemplar of what we should be doing for our communities. She would split up her week. Every day she would have something. Of course, if you look at the days of the week and what she would do on those days, for example, on Mondays, she would go out into the community and gather all the ladies, because unfortunately, after the death of Fatima al-Zahra, they were neglected. Fatima al-Zahra would gather them and have halaqat and lessons with them, and teach them, the women. So Lady Zainab then took that on board and started to apply that. On Mondays, she would teach Tafsir al-Quran. Tafsir al-Quran. The meanings of the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What do they mean? And of course, with the correct tafsir. She's part of the household pattern. Her father was a little woman, as we say. On Tuesdays, she would teach the recitation of the Quran, the pronunciation, how you pronounce them. Because by then also you had a lot of people who converted into Islam. Their pronunciation wasn't perfect. They were not Arabs. Not all of them were Arabs. So she would teach them how to pronounce the Quran. And those women in turn would teach their husbands, their children. So it was an investment, not just into one member of the community or certain members of the community. It was an investment that she would do into the whole communities. Because women then in turn, they bring up the household and the children. So they would teach their children. On Wednesdays, she would teach the belief system, aqa'id. What does La ilaha illallah mean? What is nubuwwah? What is imamah? Right? She would teach these aqa'id, the adalah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in turn explain what the mi'ad would be. She would teach the aqa'id, the belief system, that of Ahl al-Bayt as well. Thursdays, fiqh. So you can see that she almost built a whole curriculum of Islamic studies. A whole curriculum of Islamic studies. She was one of the most active people in the community in terms of sharing knowledge from a young age already. From a young age, she was already active, teaching people. Why is this important? Why is it important? It's important for us to understand one thing. It is that she is the reflection of her father, Ali ibn Abi Talib. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he would give lessons in the masjid. He would teach people in the masjid. And Lady Zainab would take the women and teach them. Right? To the extent that people slowly started mirroring her with Amir al-Mu'mineen as well. They would call her what? Zina to Abi. She is the adornment of her father. And this is the key thing for us to learn. one of the things that unfortunately a lot of our youth nowadays, we don't care about the actions that we do. We don't understand that there are some repercussions and that certain things would reflect to our parents. If we do a certain action, it will reflect towards our parents. If it's something good, people will see that. Oh, look at this person. He's doing so much good work. He's helping out in the markaz, in the masjid. Right? He's cleaning afterwards, for example, or helps out an elderly, or helps out the poor. That's because his parents or their parents taught them from a young age. And if someone does a bad thing, it reflects negatively on the parents, unfortunately. The parents might have not done anything wrong. But people will talk. People will talk. They'll say, did their parents not teach them that this is something negative, something bad to do? And this is very important for us to understand and to reflect on. May Allah have mercy upon the person who keeps away backbiters from him. Don't give people a reason to talk about you negatively behind your back. It's very important. First and foremost, you're saving a brother from actually committing a massive sin, a big sin, that is equivalent to eating your brother's flesh. That's one thing. The other thing is also you're stopping people from spreading rumors about you. How do rumors start? From one small action, someone adds a bit of flavor on top of that, and everyone who listens to it afterwards has their own little dramatic scene, and all of a sudden it becomes a massive Hollywood movie. About something small that you've done. And unfortunately, it reflects negatively on your character. Tomorrow, for the youngest, for example, tomorrow you want to get married. This one thing will be held accountable. You'll be held accountable about. Explain, why did you do this? Well, I heard this and I heard that. All this is rubbish, I've done this kind of thing. Yes, but you've done it in an area, for example, where a lot of people have seen it. And everyone started talking about it. You're giving people, in a sense, you're giving ammunition to people to use against you. What you do reflects onto your parents, reflects on you as well as the parents. There's a reason why people say, for example, right? When someone does something good, when you do something good for someone, what do they say? For example, in the army, they say, Rahmallah. Why? Because your parents taught you good. They taught you well. We look at Lady Zainab. The things that she did reflected so positively onto her father that she becomes Zina to Abiha, the adornment of her father. She makes Amir al-Mu'mineen look good. She makes him look good because of the actions she took, the activism, what she gave back. This is an aspect of her life that we learn. What else do we learn from her life? In regards to, for example, her modesty. And we mentioned it earlier in the discussion circle, the Shabbat and the Shabbat. Her modesty was top tier. When we talk about hijab, a lot of the times we talk about the physical hijab, that's of the sisters. We have our own hijab as well for the men. We have a hijab for our men. That, for example, we don't show below the knees. It has above the knees. It has to be below the knees. The arms as well. There's a certain aspect, right? There are certain things we're not allowed to show either, right? And unfortunately, our brothers are not adhering to that a lot of the times. And of course, the sisters as well. Some of them, they wouldn't adhere to their level of hijab that they would have to. We look at Lady Zainab as a role model for us. Her modesty was top tier, her hijab was top tier. When she conversed with the opposite gender, only what's necessary. She'd say only the few words that were necessary for her to conduct that conversation, complete the question, and answer the question, for example. Not beyond that. There are certain things in our conversations that we can't share. For example, our personal life with someone from the opposite gender that we have no relation to, we're not allowed to share. Personal things stays personal. Right? These are aspects we have to be careful of. Another aspect we learn from Lady Zainab is in regards to her knowledge. We already mentioned that she was brought up in a household that's filled with knowledge. The gate of the city of knowledge was Amir al-Mu'mineen, and she was a student of his. Right? But then there was other aspects where Allah blessed her with more knowledge. Allah blessed her with more knowledge. To the extent that Imam Zain al-Abidin would tell her, my auntie Zainab, you are learning without being taught. That speaks about the wisdom that she has. That's not something that you can learn, wisdom. It's naturally gifted. Sometimes we have a lot of people who are a bit older, they're knowledgeable, but not as good as wise as other people. Right? Even youngers. Sometimes we find a child who's extremely wise from a young age. That's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are certain things that we can do so we can attain these blessings as well. For example, dhikrullah. Remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tasbihat. All these things we can apply in our life. To the extent that we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything. How is this? For example, there's a hadith Qudsi. And I mentioned this as well a couple of weeks ago here in this markaz. The hadith Qudsi to me is very important, it's beautiful. It says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hadith Qudsi. Hadith Qudsi, for those who don't know, is a hadith that comes and is revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, but isn't part of the Quran. It's a hadith, it remains as a hadith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this hadith, He says, كُنْتُ كَنْزًا مَخْفِيًّا فأحببت أن أعرف فخلقت الخلق بهم عرفوني. I was a hidden treasure. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying this. I was a hidden treasure. And I wanted to be known. So I created the creation. Through the creation, they get to know me. You want to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You want to understand the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You look at the creation. Not just the creation that we have here, but the best of this creation as well. If you want to understand, for example, at a lower level, the aspect of mercy, it's embedded within our mothers. However much you do to annoy your mother, to hurt her, she will always have that aspect of mercy and that leather for you, right? She'll be lenient towards you. She'll forgive you. Sometimes it takes a bit more time. She will. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Arhamur Rahim. However much your mother is merciful towards you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more merciful than that. But you can understand an ounce of it, an aspect of mercy through the mothers. And you want to understand higher level aspects, that's of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you look at the creation. His best creations, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Lady Zainab, Hassan and Hussein and Lady Zainab, as well as the other Imams and the Prophets. What they do, you understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala slowly. You apply these things and you learn. If we don't apply these aspects, then we wouldn't be any different to the other side, the other brothers, if we all on the same page. The problem is, what makes us, well, it's not a problem, what makes us different to them is that we have our role models, the Ahlul Bayt. They teach us how we should be conducting ourselves. Why is it that unfortunately nowadays we don't read what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to do on his day-to-day, his actions, his mannerisms, his characteristics, what he'd do, how he'd speak? There's a beautiful book called Sunan al-Nabi. Right? You learn a lot of aspects of our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his life and his characteristics. How he'd sit, how he'd talk, his aspect of mercy towards people. Tough luck as well. I mean, not tough luck, but tough love, sorry. Tough love. That's another aspect we can learn. We find that a lot with our fathers. Tough love, right? They teach you a lesson, but sometimes it hurts, but it teaches you a lesson. Gives you some wisdom as well. We see that in Prophet Muhammad as well to a certain extent. How he'd be funny, how he'd joke with people. And you see all these aspects with Lady Zainab. She applies this, but shows the other side, like much her mother as well, how women should be conducting themselves. What are the things that women should be doing? We have to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything in a balance. Right? Nowadays we have, especially in our environment, the aspect of independence. Being completely independent. We have a lot of sisters nowadays, for example, they study, they work, right? And that's all fine. It's not a problem at all. We encourage that to further yourselves. But to the extent where they say, I have no need anymore for anyone, I'm independent, I don't need to get married, for example, I have no need for a male presence. Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His creation, He says everything is created in a balance. Everything is created in a balance. There are certain aspects that us as males, we lack in. But you find that in the females. And there are aspects that the females lack in, that you find in the brothers, in the males. That is what is meant when we say completing half our religion. Is that we build each other and we develop each other. Men can be, for example, very vicious, right? Very strong and strong-headed as well. Very stubborn at sometimes as well. But we learn to be diplomatic by dealing with the opposition. We learn to give. We learn to be more flexible. We learn to be a bit more emotional at times as well. These are things that, unfortunately, a lot of us as brothers, we lack in. But that's natural. We learn that from the opposite gender. And we learn it from Lady Zainab. There are things that she did that the men didn't do, couldn't do. For example, the way she would talk towards the women. Right? Anyone else as a man, they couldn't speak to the woman in the same manner as them. Right? But we learn to live with each other. These are lessons we can learn from Lady Zainab. These are lessons that we learn from her life. أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد.